So, excellent. I think that's pretty well it for the housekeeping. So firstly, what I'd like to do is just introduce myself. So my name's Emily Zessers. I'm at the moment the Acting Executive Manager for the Northern Territory for Volunteering SA&NT, but normally the Client Relationships Manager. And this is a new series we've started. A couple of weeks ago, we had our first one. Some of you might have joined us with Evelyn O'Loughlin. But what we decided for today was, with last week being International Day of People with a Disability, we thought it would be a great time, also coinciding with the launch of a fantastic new website and program that Volunteering SA&NT is a part of. So I'd just like to introduce you to the people joining me here today. And so Jen and Hannah, you're welcome to take your phones and computers off mute now so that you can introduce yourselves as well. But I'll hand over to Tracey Fox and I'll let you introduce yourself, Tracey.
Hello everyone, I'm the Executive Manager for Volunteering SA&NT for South Australia and haven't been involved in any of the new webinars yet, but some of you may know me well from a lot of the training that we've conducted over the years. It's great to be here and it's also great to be able to talk with you about our new program, Volunteerability.
And thanks, Tracey, that's great. Joni, can I hand over to you to introduce yourself now as well?
Thanks, Emily. Hi, everyone. My name is Joni Cottrell. I am the Program Coordinator for Volunteerability here at SA&NT.
Excellent. And Jen, I'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Okay, I'm Jen Allen, and can you hear me all right?
Perfect.
Cool. I just wanted to make sure I've untapped the mute button. I was involved with the co-design workshops for volunteerability and at Arana, and also I'm on the steering committee for that too. So yeah, it's my passion. So
Perfect. Thank you so much. And also to Hannah, I'll let you introduce yourself as well. Thank you.
Hi, how you going? Yeah, I'm Hannah, and I've just very recently come on board with Joni and Tracey for the volunteerability program. So I'm very fresh with it.
Fantastic. No, thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us today. And I think this should be a really great session and some great resources that we'll talk about. And everyone in the chat today is a resource. So I'm just going to share my screen and hope that all works pretty straightforward. Let's just make sure. Joni, can you see just the first page?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Just on the logo page. Perfect. Excellent. All right. Well, let's get started. But firstly, Volunteering SA&NT acknowledges the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting here today throughout Australia, and we recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community. And we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging as well. So fantastic. All right, so today we are going to talk about inclusive volunteering. And so firstly, I'm just going to have a bit of a chat with Tracey before we chat with the others.
Yep.
So Tracey, tell us a little bit about this program, Volunteerability, and I guess, you know, why it's important and yeah.
Yeah. So volunteerability, well, it wasn't called that. It had a very long name about inclusive volunteering. Back in 2019, about September 2019, we started having a chat with Southern Volunteering and Northern Volunteering and our other partner now, Arana Disability Services, to join together in a new project that was funded by the NDIS. And the project concept was about assisting people to find volunteering opportunities who may have not been able to do that before. So it was people with disability, it was about meaningful volunteering, and it was about being supported by someone who was trained to help someone. So we call them volunteer buddies. And also to work with volunteer involving organisations that were really accepting and respectful of welcoming people with disability into their volunteering programs. Fortunately, our proposal was successful. It took us a few months to put it together, and we were funded by NDIS. And what we've done now is created a four-way partnership between us and Southern Volunteering, Northern Volunteering and Arana. And we collaborated and have been developing a 3-year program with the proposal concepts as we put them in. So hence Volunteerability was born.
Fantastic.
So I guess why it's important is for us as a group of stakeholders is that, you know, we're passionate about volunteering. It's an important part of our Australian way of life, and being part of a helping community, doing things you believe in, sharing your skills or learning new ones, and being around people who respect you and admire you, and you can get on with things with other people. So we believe in volunteering is for everyone, and regardless of your abilities. And so we really notice that there's a gap out in our community for people with disability to be involved. And so this program is designed to make that happen for more people in our communities. But more importantly, well, they're very important aspects. But more importantly, we've also noticed with some research that inclusion for people with disabilities is not a given. It's not always there. Sometimes there are barriers. It can be tokenistic. So what we've designed is a program that will work not only with people with disability, but volunteers who are trained to work with people with disability in a very respectful and meaningful way, but also to work with volunteer involving organisations. And you might be part of one of those organisations now that wants to bring in people with disability, but not sure how to go about it. And so the program is about educating people as well. Volunteering for people with disability can also be difficult, and I'm sure Hannah and Jen might talk a little bit about that as well. Sometimes it can be stressful, tokenistic, not meaningful, and we believe this program is going to make a big difference in providing supportive opportunities for people to do various volunteer opportunities and different things, to try, to experience, to learn, and to use their skills or learn new skills in different environments. And as a partnership with Arana and Southern Volunteering and Northern Volunteering, we believe we can achieve more together and be able to do that rather than as separate organisations, to make this program happen, to make it successful, and hopefully involve lots of people. We've certainly got some numbers to build, and Joni's going to talk a little bit about that as well, but we hope we're going to be able to reach a lot of people in South Australia.
That's fantastic. And for those that might be joining us today and have any questions, again, we encourage you to use that Q&A box. And once we've all had a bit of a chat with you, we'll be able to refer back to those questions. Because I think, like you said, Tracey, there's a lot of organisations looking at how to engage more of a diverse workforce when it comes to volunteers.
Absolutely. And so if you need help, we're here to help you with the new program.
Great. No, it's very exciting. Looking forward to it. Yep. Thanks, Tracey. So, Joni, just a couple of questions for you now, and I'll also screen share again shortly. But can you explain, so Joni is the Program Coordinator for Volunteerability. Can you explain to us a bit about your role and what that means?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Emily. And apologies to anyone who might be listening and has heard little bits and pieces of this before. But my role with Volunteerability is really to support those 3 cohorts that Tracey's just mentioned that will be involved in this program. So it's the person with a disability who wants to volunteer, maybe not sure how to go about it, where to look, maybe lacking some confidence to engage in volunteering. And so they'll be supported by the volunteer buddy and that trained person, as Tracey was mentioning. And I guess one of the key things with the volunteer with disability, or the potential volunteer, excuse me, is that they only need to self-identify having a disability, whether that's visible or invisible, and don't necessarily have to have an NDIS plan, but being 18 and above. So that's really the only criteria. And the whole crux of this program is really that they will be supported through the process to engage in volunteering in a meaningful way. And that support can be really dependent, and it will be tailored, and it will be using that person-centred approach with that person with a disability of what support do they recognise that they would like. So it could be from those initial chatting about what type of interests they have, excuse me, what type of roles they might be looking for. With the trained volunteer buddy, they might start looking at some of those roles. It could be through assistance with navigating some of those initial processes and onboarding of volunteering around accessing and filling out, excuse me, application forms and other related documents. But where I see a big part of the support coming into play with the person with disability and volunteering and the volunteer buddy is actually starting to volunteer together and learning those steps and what they're doing, what the tasks involve, getting to know the people and the organisation that they'll be sustainably being able to go on and volunteer, hopefully further down the track without the buddy. So that just will take some time to build those confidence and gain those skills. So there's really no set length of time that the buddy will be supporting them. It really will be chatting to the volunteer with disability of when they are ready. So with those two groups kind of matched, the other way that then I'm kind of linking and connecting and supporting in will be with the volunteer involving organisations. So I have been chatting to a lot of volunteer managers and coordinators already, but really to offer that, again, that one-on-one support with that organisation who is engaging volunteers with disability. How's it going? What are maybe some challenges that might be coming up that we can talk through together? But really keeping those three groups of people with the volunteer with disability, the buddy and the volunteer involving organisation, a lot of that clear communication through that whole process, so everyone's getting the support they need from that start through to that sustainable ongoing volunteering.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Joni. And I think it's great to hear that there isn't that time frame with it as well, and that those relationships and connection and rapport can build for people to build that confidence and trust.
Absolutely.
So fantastic. Both you and Tracey have mentioned that genuine engagement is an important aspect of this program, or of, you know, supporting people into volunteering. So can you share some of the learnings about engaging volunteers with disabilities that you've taken away from the co-design workshop?
Yeah, the co-design aspect has been really vital to developing the program, and then the associated resources that have come out of that. And as Jen mentioned when she introduced herself, she was part of one of the people as part of the co-design workshops. And there were a series of them, and we were looking at different aspects around volunteering and how to engage in volunteering. But one of the big things that I took away was the barriers to volunteering that people with disabilities were highlighting. And I think it comes back again to what Tracey was saying. There's a group in our wider society that are generally overlooked and undervalued, and not being involved and able to share skills and have genuine involvement in the wider community that, as we all know, then really affects the general well-being. So some of those experiences that that I took away that have come up on the screen here, if you can all see, those barriers to volunteering that the co-design workshop highlighted were negative experiences. So if people have been involved in the past and for whatever reason, whether it just wasn't receptive to making adjustments or not so welcoming and friendly or accessible in different ways, that had a big part in maybe not wanting to give volunteering a go again. Role accessibility, again, what formats are available for different processes and different stages of volunteering, whether that's, as we all know, so many things have now gone online, but that actually makes it quite inaccessible for many people as well with different aspects of volunteering. The general physical environment, and again, that can be the welcoming and accessible entry, office layout, etc., accessible bathrooms. Attitudes, some of the things that came up around that the co-design workshop mentioned, which was really important, were those misconceptions. So one of the misconceptions that I kind of would come across quite a bit through some of my conversations with different organisations so far were there can be those I guess, or generalisations or assumptions of disability being high needs, low functioning, where in many cases that's not actually the reality. But also then coming back to where to look. People weren't actually sure, well, where do I look to volunteer? Who do I contact? What's that next step? And again, this is where I think volunteerability can be that lovely conduit and connector for assisting someone through that process with the support of the volunteer buddy. Transport was also an issue. Is it accessible? Is it nearby to public transport? But also one of the things that was highlighted was reimbursement. So sometimes just having some transport reimbursement for volunteers would make a big difference also if they were able to regularly be involved. And also just the processes in general, how adaptable are they? How open to flexibility in days and times? Talking about adjustments with, you know, volunteer roles or PDs in terms of tasks, and is there flexibility with being able to talk about what might be able to be taken out or amended, etc. So that was really important and a big learning thing, and that's been really helpful in terms for me for developing resources as well in supporting and ongoing supporting of volunteer involving organisations.
That's great, thanks Joni. And I think I can probably imagine that this is quite useful to know what those barriers are for people looking to engage. So thank you. I guess to continue on with a bit what you've mentioned as well, how will volunteerability work with and support VIOs to do that meaningful engagement with volunteers with disability?
So I guess a few ways. I've been chatting, as I mentioned, with a number of organisations already. So there's been just some organic conversations around identifying issues or gaps around processes and different areas. So there's a lot that comes through conversation where we can do that and support volunteer involving organisations with, maybe identifying areas to enhance inclusion. And at the end of the day, inclusion benefits everyone. It doesn't matter what cohort it is either. So really, it's a massive tick for the wider community in general. But also there'll be some sessions developed around inclusive volunteering and engaging volunteers with disability. So that's where we'll be talking a lot about how can we look at some of those steps of volunteering and those processes and really break them down to work out ways to make them more accessible and inclusive. With that session, there'll be resources and templates that then managers and coordinators can take away and tailor to suit themselves and their roles, etc. And talking through scenarios. And I think a big part of it, Emily, is really around a little bit like, hopefully, you know, things might come up today with questions, but it's actually really just talking about things. So what have people experienced already? So you can kind of nut out some of those scenarios and challenges. And one of the things I'm keen to do is kind of in the planning stage at the moment. I've mentioned it to a few people who said that they'd be quite interesting, is just to have some smaller, I guess, catch-ups, could be on Zoom, just some small conversations with managers and volunteer involving organisations, just to talk about some of those things, to have that peer-to-peer support so that we're actually all learning and sharing, so that it really can be a more inclusive, I guess, wider society in general. One of the things you mentioned, that the Volunteerability website has now come up. Yes, it's up there new and live, and VIOs and organisations can access inclusive resources up there. And a big part of the program is also there's disability awareness sessions being developed and delivered by Orana with co-facilitators who have lived experiences of disability. So they'll be able to bring in a lot of those first-hand experiences and knowledge, etc. as well. So that's up there for people to book into or find out more about. And I know that that can also be tailored for organisations as well.
Fantastic, thanks Joni, that's great. And we'll share that website with you shortly once we've finished our side of the presentation. But it's really good to hear all of that and know that those resources are out there. So
it's really important, because we really want people to ask questions, don't we, Joni? The whole point of this is to, you know, if you're not sure, just ask. And so working with Orana and also Northern and Southern, it's about being able to tap into our resources and keeps us on our toes about our learning as well. But we want to share that with everyone.
Definitely. No, you know, no need to be afraid to ask those
Absolutely.
questions. It's how
That's
we
right.
learn.
Yep.
So, yeah, thank you.
And
So,
Emily, oh sorry,
yeah,
Emily, just going to say, and that was again one of the big things that came out of the co-design workshop. It's the two-way learning. So it's the learning of both sides when engaging volunteers with disability, and it is okay to make mistakes and ask questions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. It's great to hear that reassurance.
Yeah,
So,
and Jen's nodding.
yeah, yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. So we have Jen and Hannah, and I might throw to you, Jen, first. But we've got a lot of organisations being represented here or joining us today. So if there's something that you would want them to know or you'd like to share about engaging volunteers with disability, what would that be, and what do you think is important?
Hi, thanks, Emily. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, cool. I think it's just very important. I mean, I think this program is different because being volunteerability, the organisations are obviously open to accepting people with disabilities. I think one of the problems is that there's a lack of staff in these organisations, and there's just lack of person power to actually, I guess, keep that volunteer who has disabilities, you know, happy and up to speed with everything that's going on in the organisation. I've had experiences where, because my disability is a back disability, I mean, when I walk, you can see that, but, you know, people, the whole sector of disability is I think, just a very evolving one. And, you know, organisations can either, you know, take you for granted, whether you've got a disability or not, that happens. But people with disabilities, I think, particularly need to feel supported in their role. And I don't think that happens very often. It doesn't happen terribly often in my role. I actually work at Philip Kennedy aged care home, and I sing and play ukulele to the residents there. And I love doing what I do, but I've mentioned to Joni and other people at the co-design workshops in the past that if it wasn't for my passion for what I do, it would, you know, my role would be not terribly easy. And that's because, you know, there isn't the backing. There isn't, you just go in there, you do your job, which is fine. You know, I love doing it, so I don't have a problem with it. But at times I have felt quite out of the loop. We don't have very many volunteer meetings, you know, with other volunteers, which I don't think we've actually had one. We have training, but that's more professional training, and it doesn't necessarily apply to our role, you know, volunteers, because volunteers are very broad in what they do. So there needs to be something that brings particularly volunteers with disabilities into the framework of the organisation, not just treated as, oh, you know, this person's a volunteer. We get the occasional, like we get a Christmas meal or Christmas function at the end of the year, but there isn't anything to really link us together as volunteers, nor is there any process to make us feel like we're part of the organisation. And that, I think, just needs to happen. And I know it's an issue with, you know, staff availability. They're usually busy doing a million other things. And hopefully that's where this volunteerability program will help, that by having a buddy to help the person with disabilities in their role. But I think it's certainly missing. I think clear communication is missing too. I think that's one of the biggest things that people need to learn how to do. You know, people, for whatever reason, don't tend to speak up or ask questions. And that's important, as Joni said, because if you don't ask questions, you don't learn. All those barriers that were mentioned before are totally valid, and in different amounts, because some people have physical barriers, so they need access to toilets, they need access to the building. They also have mental health barriers, and they're invisible sometimes. So this is where communication really comes in. I just think it's a matter of really listening, and it's a two-way process. It's active listening, it's reflective listening. You know, it shouldn't just be done as an afterthought. I think this needs to be part of the process, this ongoing, you know, are you okay in your role? Is there anything we can do? And vice versa, for the person with disabilities to say, you know, am I doing my role okay? That kind of thing, just at regular intervals. And that certainly doesn't happen in my volunteer workplace, and has never happened. I basically do the same thing. I used to work at a couple of other places as well, QEH in the gerontic section there, and St Margaret's Convalescent Hospital, and Anglicare at Grange. And at various times, I just felt, you know, almost like part of the furniture and not particularly valued. And I know that's a volunteer issue, you know, let alone volunteers with disabilities. Generally, volunteers often get treated like that. So obviously people with disabilities, whether they be, you know, mental or physical, needs to be, you know, there needs to be all sorts of modifications done, and that's in attitudes, and that's and not to just see the person as having a disability. This is where it becomes very, very a fine line, because, you know, people with disabilities don't want to be just defined as that, but at the same time, there needs to be some attention given to it. You know, are you okay? Do we need to do anything for you to make your role easier? Those kinds of things. An orientation session, I think, should be given. I certainly didn't have that. I had it at St Lawrence's, but it consisted of a 3-minute fire drill thing. Nothing about, you know, where we were going to go in our role. And I know these aren't easy things, you know, to do, because as I said before, everybody's busy and under the pump. But, you know, if we can put it out there, what's needed, perhaps organisations can take it on. And I'm positive that the Volunteerability project will help with that, because if there's a buddy, then there's somebody to go to help. And I think that's been needed for a long, long time in the volunteer sector of the community in regard to people with disabilities. Yeah, very fine balancing act, because again, you know, it's the thing of not being defined by a disability, not being judged by a disability, but at the same time, you know, accepting that that's there. And I guess the person with a disability has to lead that. Yeah, you know, it has to say, this is what I need, this is, you know, this is what I don't require. So it's an individual situation. It's time consuming, but to get the roles, you know, succeeding on both sides, I think you need to do those things. Yeah, all sorts of things. I mean, you know, the accessibility to the building is so important. You know, if you can't get in, you know, you can't volunteer. Also accessible toilets, you know, for people in wheelchairs. Yeah. Or having spaces where people, this is what we spoke about at the co-design workshops, having spaces perhaps for people who have autism and get over, you know, stimulated, somewhere where they can go to feel, you know, calm, so they can continue their role. All sorts of things like that. So it's a combination of, you know, obviously putting a bit of money into it, which is again, you know, going to be an issue, and also just asking questions and continually. It's a continual process, an ongoing process. So don't just sort of, you know, drop the volunteer there, you know, and expect everything to be fine, because there are obviously certain things that need to be done to, you know, to make it a pleasant experience for people with disabilities. Yeah.
Great. No, that's yeah, fantastic.
No, that's excellent.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, and really that, like you said, being led by the person with the disability, I think really vital there.
And that takes particular skills. Not everybody has those skills. You know, the lifestyle coordinator where I work, she's wonderful in her role. She's quite a young person. She's got great energy. You know, I see her and I know her role is very complex, particularly with this COVID year we've had with all the lockdown. I think she just simply doesn't have the time. I know with that role there's a lot of paperwork involved, and you know, trying to keep up with everything there. So I'm not blaming her at all. I just think she needs support. Maybe every, I know this is a bit pie in the sky, but maybe every place, every volunteer involving organisation needs a particular role, you know, volunteer coordinator. There is one at Southern Cross Care, which is where Philip Kennedy is part of that conglomerate, but she's off-site, you know, she's not working where I am, and that's the problem. You know, you need somebody on the ground, and again, this is hopefully where the buddies will come in and, you know, come into their own. So I think it's a very exciting project.
Thank you, Jen. That's fantastic. And Hannah, would now like to, you know, ask you as well, what do you think is really, you know, should be shared about engaging volunteers with a disability, and what do you think organisations should really, you know, consider, and what do you think is an important message to get out there?
Yep, well, I had pretty much everything that Jen said written down.
Great.
I've only got a couple of points left. So I'll be very quick. But I think, yeah, one of the first and most important things is try and gain some common ground, like you would do with anyone in a conversation, like disability or not. And I think that sort of, makes both parties feel comfortable, and, if they've got something in common, it just makes things a bit smoother. And I think also compassion is a big thing as well. So if you can sort of try and be on the same level as someone, that's helpful as well. And sort of maybe find out the person's struggles, like what things they struggle with just in their daily life and at the volunteering, and even getting to and from the volunteering. What are their barriers? And ask them what they would find helpful. So what people could do to help them out, basically.
Oh no, I think that's really important.
Very important points.
Definitely. It's great to hear from people with a lived experience to be able to, for organisations to be able to consider some of those key points as well.
Yeah.
Before I throw it open to the rest of the attendees here today around any questions, does anyone else have anything in our panel and our chat here today that you'd like to add? I'll pop up now on the screen the website so everybody can check that out, and then I'll read through a few of the comments that have been made in the chat and also the one in the Q&A. But if you've got questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. But yeah, Tracey, anything, or Joni, Hannah or Jen you'd like to add?
Look, I just wanted to, and I can see some of the comments that are coming up, that it is a juggling act when you're running a volunteer program. The bigger the volunteer program, the harder it is. And we know that a lot of organisations, it's really hard to have someone dedicated to looking after volunteers. And so when you add in someone who has some special needs or extra needs that need, some planning around as well, that does add a complexity to an already busy schedule for people in looking after volunteers and trying to do the work of the organisation. Because we also have to remember from an organisational perspective, and volunteering SA&NT is no different. We have volunteers here and we have some volunteers with disability here as well. In fact, Hannah's one of them. But the thing is, we always need to remember why volunteers are in our organisation in the first place, and it's there to do the work of the organisation. And so it is a balancing act when we have such high needs, particularly for some volunteers. How do we make sure that we're still on track with what the organisation is trying to achieve and not being sidetracked by we have to do all of these extra things? And I know it costs money, it costs time. A lot of organisations don't have the resources. There are ways, there are things that we can do to help people to find other people, more buddy type people that can work in an organisation to help volunteer programs. But I know these are some of the issues that volunteer programs really struggle with. I know we get these questions all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
And I know that a lot of organisations would like to be welcoming of more people to come in, but really don't have the resources to be able to do it. And I guess Jen, said it as well. And maybe it is about the compassion that Hannah was talking about as well. But it's the start of the conversation, and that's what we want to have. It's the start of asking those questions. How can we do this differently? How can we add value to what we're already doing with our volunteer programs? And how can we be inclusive without losing sight of our volunteer programs are actually here to help the organisation achieve their goals, their mission and their vision. And so it is a very big balancing act with all of those things to consider. So we understand how difficult it can be for a lot of people.
That's right. No, really important. I think I agree, Tracey. And you've got to start somewhere, and you will always, if you're limited with resources, that could always be a barrier. But if you want to try and be, like Tracey said, there's ways and means to think, a bit differently about, sometimes it's not about you doing all the work. You might even source some volunteers to
That's
help
right.
with putting these things in place
Yes.
as well.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah.
Mm.
On the screen, we've got the website, and in case anyone can't see the screen, the website is volunteerability.aranaonline.com.au. And also if you have any questions or anything that comes out of today as well that you'd like to, you can go to that website, or you can contact us here at Volunteering SA&NT, and Joni or Tracey, you know, that's an area that they're working
Definitely
in, so.
Joni.
Yeah. But Joni, Hannah or Jen, anything else to share before I look at the questions?
Probably just one thing that I should have added, because it's come up in conversations when I've been chatting with volunteer managers and coordinators. One of the questions they have had was around a volunteer buddy. In terms of some organisations may already be engaging volunteers with disability. And when we've chatted about the program, I've actually gone, oh, actually a buddy might be a really great resource to be able to link in with them. So it doesn't necessarily, we can definitely link a volunteer buddy in with one of your already established volunteers who might already be engaged in volunteering in whatever role that might be, but looking for a little bit of that extra support. So also just keep that in mind as well.
Great, thank you.
I just wanted to say everything Tracey said I completely agree with. I think that balancing act is very important, and I think the point she made that volunteers are in the end there to assist the organisation is important. You know, so very fine tuning, very sensitive balancing act, and accepting that mistakes are going to be made, but not, you know, being constructive in criticism, and again, two-way process, not necessarily, you know, getting over emotional about it, I guess. You know, it's just going to be difficult, and an acceptance of that, but a willingness to move forward, you know, in incremental steps, I think. Because it's a long journey. It's a long journey.
Yeah, well said, Jen. Yeah.
So a couple of questions that have come up, and I'm happy to even answer some of these offline potentially, as they're probably not necessarily specific just to today's session. No. But I guess one of the things that people have asked is, how does Volunteering SA&NT assist people in promoting volunteering? And so we do have a free service that you don't need to be a member of our organisation, but we help people with advertising roles. So you can put your role up onto our website, which then goes on to the We Do app in South Australia, and also Seek and Go Volunteer. And that's a free service. You just need to have a couple of insurances, but that information is on our website. And the other one...
Can I just answer this other one?
Yeah.
So, Eduardo, you've also made some comments about that we're all competing for volunteers in a very small space. In actual fact, there are lots of people out there wanting to volunteer, and we need more jobs for volunteers. And if ever you're in doubt about that, just have an emergency, and spontaneous volunteers come out of the woodwork. And we have, for example, last summer, we had thousands of people contact us wanting to volunteer, and in lots of different ways, not actually about putting out fires, but from an admin perspective, taking phone calls, packing bags, you know, as well as out helping on the properties with actual physical work. So we believe there are lots of people out there who want to volunteer, who maybe haven't even thought about it yet. So not only do we advertise for you to find those volunteers, but we're trying to ramp up our marketing and our promotions to say to people, if you've never volunteered before, now's the time. And if you're looking for a volunteering, we've got lots of opportunities. Of course, we know COVID has really closed that down a lot over the last 12 months. We know that we lost about 70% of our volunteering opportunities over the past 10 months with COVID, but they are starting to come back. There is hope. The light at the end of the tunnel isn't a train heading towards us. It's actually great opportunities for people to come out. We believe this program is going to help us also find those opportunities as organisations come to us. But also it's about, if you're not sure about how we can help, give us a ring.
Yeah,
We come out and see you. We're doing lots of Zoom. We're doing lots of phone calls. We're here to help and to have those conversations to help you find the volunteers that you do need. Yes, we need volunteers as well. We've just started our search for our volunteer buddies. Joni, I think we've had our first expression of interest on our website.
We've had a couple now, but
fantastic.
More to them, so that's great. We've just started to recruit those, and I know, Teresa, you've asked the question about who provides the training and matches and buddying up. That's all through us. That's kind of my role. What I do, a big part of that, and matching with the volunteer with disability as well, and linking in with the VIO. And also for anyone who might be joining from the regional areas, really important to note that volunteerability is not just Metro Adelaide, but it is actually going to be rolled out next year to the regional zones as well. So down in Victor, I believe Riverland area, and up in the mid-north around Port Augusta, Port Pirie, Whyalla, that type of area as well. So keep that in mind if you're from those regions.
Yes,
right.
Indeed.
And I think that's just, you know, even with the year that we've had, it's about, you know, being flexible and being open-minded to what volunteer roles and opportunities your organisation does provide. And maybe it's, you know, more short-term whilst we're experiencing a bit of a roller coaster, I guess, this year. It might be that you need to look at how you can provide volunteering opportunities for people from home, virtual volunteering. So, you know, as people have highlighted, you know, there are some challenges, and, you know, it is a competitive at times, but there's a lot of people out there, and I think differently about what you do offer as roles so that you can attract that diverse, you know, workforce of volunteers as well.
So at our peak, we have over 900,000 people in South Australia volunteering. That's an awful lot of people. Some of them have gone quiet for a little while, and I think after Christmas, as things start to reinvigorate, people will come back. But there's opportunities now to think about how you want your volunteering to look, who you would like to volunteer with you, and what sort of roles you have. And be able to, we can get that information out to the sector as well, out to people in general.
And another question was around, is there an issue, I guess, in trying to manage volunteers so much or too much more than working on what the organisation has been formed for? Well, that's what Tracey was saying again around, you know, you may not always have the resources, but you've got to go back to why are we involving volunteers, and what is the organisation trying to achieve? So volunteers, you know, are there to add that value to your organisation. But I think, you know, you need to really think about, before you go off and just sometimes get volunteers, what resources do you have, and be realistic about that. And I'm talking in general now about volunteering, but, you know, we understand resources can be tight, but go back to why are we involving volunteers, and what are the real benefits, and what do we want to utilise people's knowledge, experience, and skills for in our organisation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it's really important that you understand what the volunteers are going to be able to do for your organisation. And often breaking tasks down is a way of thinking about, well, who can do a specific task as opposed to who can come in and do a range of tasks.
That's right, yeah.
And particularly if people, you know, we know people are time poor these days. They might only want to give you a couple of hours a fortnight, or a couple of hours a week, or maybe even a month. How do you make that work for you, and how can that be successful to make sure your organisation is, you know, is achieving what it's meant to be achieving?
We've had another question. Do you think it is appropriate to positively promote a volunteer buddy system to our local community to show that volunteering opportunities are available to everyone? Who'd like to answer that?
Oh, Jen.
Sorry, just the question again, Claire. Yeah.
Oh, yes, sorry, I'll reread that. So, do you think it's appropriate to positively promote a volunteer buddy system to our local community to show that volunteering opportunities are available to everyone?
Oh, yes, I definitely think so. Definitely. Positive thing. It can only be a win-win. So definitely is my answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And that's a lot of what we'll be doing. We've been in development mode, haven't we, Joni? We've creating all the resources and looking at about how we're going to roll this out. And the next part of it, with the Volunteerability website now live, there'll be a lot of information, there'll be a lot of marketing, a lot of promotion that'll be coming to probably a screen near you. And so, you know, look out for the information. Get onto our website, onto the Volunteerability website. And certainly we'll be getting it out there. So it's a really big thing. We will be doing that.
And I think, Tracey, also just a key, sorry, I didn't see who asked that question, but a key in any kind of buddy style volunteering role is really about whoever that buddy is working alongside and supporting. And I know this is very much part of the ethos is what we're using when developing this program, is that it is a strengths-based approach and person-centered. So it's actually building those skills and capacity and capabilities of that person who's needing that support. But I think that's really important, so that there's quite defined boundaries of what the buddy does and doesn't do, because it is about building confidence and skills and genuine, I guess, inclusiveness. So not doing, it's really anyone who's in the community development sector, it's really about that old adage, you know, doing something with someone, not for someone.
Exactly. Someone mentioned before in here, and I'm not sure if you wanted to elaborate on the question, I think, Mike, it was around, I am using a JAWS screen reader app for people who are vision impaired. So I guess there's not a question linked to that, unless you want to add that, Mike. But thoughts on those sorts of things, I guess.
Well, I know there's a lot of different tools, and Mike, I think, has highlighted one of them that can be used to assist people with vision impairment. So that's, I guess, a tool that a volunteer involving organisation might be able to also utilise, and that's, I guess, being able then to reduce one barrier as well. There's also something else that we had come through the other day to us, Emily, as a question. Keen to hear other people's comments as well, and any chat comments. But we had a question around how to navigate someone who may not has lower levels of reading and writing, and how to navigate that process then through training or other workshops that they might need to attend. One of my, or a couple of my thoughts would be, do they need to actually write responses or read? Is there something that you can do verbally with someone, that they're able to provide examples of things that they're doing as well? And also really important to actually ask someone probably that at that initial interview or induction stage, where you're getting to have a bit of a chat with them, like Hannah was saying, actually really important to build some rapport and get to know what their supports are and requirements. Actually ask if they want to bring someone along to training as well, and so organisations again being adaptable or flexible and having those options for people.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I think it's about being flexible, and maybe it's, if you know, it's more about checking in with people that they understand if there's specific requirements your organisation needs to have that might be around work health and safety. Can you do that via a conversation rather than needing to exactly like you said. Yeah, that's right.
And I think, you know, we've talked about flexibility, and that's really important here, that we come up with flexible ways of, you know, if you really think someone's, you know, a valuable addition to your team and you would like to have them in there, let's find a way around it. There's a very old saying in, and it's a fellow wrote a book, and the name's escaping me of the author, but find another way was something that, you know, was around in the 70s and 80s in the disability sector, and it's still alive and well today, because there are other ways of being able to do things. Just because we're locked into, you know, processes, and a lot of them are online now, there are still other ways to do things, and so if we can help you do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, using things like, you know, film and video and all sorts of different, you know, I know another thing that's come up this year, because a lot of things have moved to online, you know, we don't want to go down, or some organisations, we can't always go down that path of doing everything online as well, because we need to be able to know that some people don't access technology as freely and available. So how do we, you know, always ensure that we can find another way? I like that.
Yeah, and also about the principles of inclusion are about, as Hannah said, ask the questions, find out what people need and what helps to make an individual be included in something, and it's different for everybody. And I noticed, Mike, you've put up your question there that Purple Orange are actually doing some inclusion awareness training as well. That's fantastic. Hopefully, if people have that information, they can tap into that as well. The more we can get out there, the better. We like it when lots of people are doing it. So.
Yeah, and yeah, I've seen that as well, Mike, through the Purple Orange's e-newsletters. It sounds really exciting as well. Also involving people with lived experiences like the one that's being developed through Volunteerability too, which is also, yeah, I guess, transitioned across to DSS at the moment, isn't it, Tracey, with the funding for that?
That's right, yeah. Daryl Scott, you're right. Oh, thank you, whoever put that up.
Great.
It's very old.
Yeah.
Like me. So Eduardo's asked a question about naming some fully volunteering only organisations that are excellent organisations. Look, we won't name them here. I'm happy to talk with people about that. But there are a lot of sporting organisations, arts organisations, who self-help organisations that do run their organisations very well. They're totally volunteer run. They're small. They don't have, you know, major processes, but they do have processes. And the other thing that we haven't talked about, but you might be interested in knowing, is that we follow the national standards for volunteer involvement. And a lot of these smaller organisations find those national standards really easy to follow. And if you'd like more information, certainly get onto our website and we can talk with you about that as well. Definitely. But there certainly are a lot of excellent organisations out in the community at grassroots level doing a lot of wonderful work.
So we've got about 4 more minutes. Any questions for Tracey, Joni, Hannah or Jen? These all 4 women here today are great resources to tap into, so I encourage you to utilise this time for one more question if anyone has that. But if not, you know, as we've mentioned already, there is the website, which I can share again in case people missed it. But feel free to.
And just to say, Emily, I'm really happy to follow up and chat with anyone who wants to get in touch as well, having more questions or wanting to find out a little bit more about the different aspects around that volunteer side of volunteerability, because as I mentioned, that's really what my role is, engaging with.
Yeah, fantastic. We've just had an apology that Jen's phone has just had a moment, so but if there's no more questions from anyone, we'd just like to really thank Joni, Tracey, and particular Jen and Hannah for volunteering their time today to help us with this conversation. I think it's so valuable to hear from people with lived experiences, and for organisations to you know, really go forward and look at being more inclusive. And thank you, you know, Joni and Tracey have a wealth of knowledge as well here that you can tap into, and look forward to seeing how this project evolves. And for those that might be joining us from the Northern Territory, you know, whilst this isn't a program we're running up there at the moment, still feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions about this, because, you know, at the end of the day, we're here about volunteering and we love seeing organisations be as inclusive as possible. So yes.
And just quickly, I see Teresa, you had popped out. I did direct an answer to you, but happy to for you to get in touch with me. What I'll do is just send you a quick chat message with my email and phone number. So if you want to just follow up, give me a call or an email today.
So thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a fabulous Christmas and New Year.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
And stay tuned for more of our conversations about volunteering into the future. And also we will, in 2021, still continue to have our online training options as well. But it sounds like there's going to be some great training to access through volunteerability. Yeah, thank you, everyone, for being part of it.
Indeed. Thanks, everyone. It's been great to have a chat with you, and we look forward to seeing you all again in 2021. Can't believe it's nearly here. But have a great Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone as well. Thank you.
You too.
Thanks,
Bye.
Hannah. Thanks, Jen. Bye.
Thank you. See you, everyone. Just about a few more participants about to leave, but then we can have a quick chat if you like, everyone.
Yeah. So stay on.
Stay there with us. Yeah.
Don't go anywhere, Hannah. Don't go anywhere, Jen.
You're still recording, Emily.
Oh, yes, I'll finish the recording. Thank you.